So folks, this is a particularly important topic. I've done a vlog on finding a lawyer before, but not on how to find a decent lawyer. And I've just had a lot of reflections around this topic over the past few weeks with people, litigants in person who have got sufficiently high value, complex cases that either they can't run through the courts themselves because they're kind of too complex, or they're thinking, well, actually, it's actually tactically a good idea, frankly, to instruct a law firm formally. It might be a higher value case, for example, and therefore, you're looking at your options. And I often soapbox on the importance of preparation. Getting the plane launched, getting the rocket into space is absolutely critical, and it will make your life so much easier and so less expensive if you do bring the case properly or defend the case properly. So let's just kind of look at the preparation side of things in terms of, my options, whether or not to use a lawyer. There's a decision flow chart, incidentally, that you can email us and we'll send it to you. It's free, which will help you make decisions about, whether to run the case yourself, whether to throw the towel in on a case. In life, pick your battles, and litigation should be a commercial endeavour in which you weigh up the risks and the benefits and, reach a business-like conclusion before you bring or defend a case. Just a little bit of admin spiel, the front end of this vlog before I get into the nuts and bolts of the topic. I will list the topics, by the way, the sections of the topic in the description box or in the email if you're a subscriber, so that you can skim through to what you think is key. Just in terms of Court Wingman itself, we are flourishing, I would say, certainly ticking along very nicely, getting a lot of inquiries. I know a lot of people like to, pick up the phone to someone. Traditionally, I'm totally on board with the idea of speaking to people over the telephone, but we're not a very big business. I did trial a reception service for a while, but frankly, the simplest and easiest way is to email us at hello and then to schedule a legal surgery. When you do send an email, you'll get a welcome email reply, which directs you to a video which will help you prepare relevant documentation for the legal surgery. So here's the problem. Lawyers live in a little bit of an ivory tower. You don't know them from Adam as often as not. How on earth do you, and often your reservations about using a law firm is simply that you don't know them, and it is a technical area, so you're kind of putting yourself into the lap of the gods. Well, look, how can you find a decent lawyer? How can you limit the dangers and the risks of them being the wrong lawyer? A lot of our clients actually come to us having already spent quite a lot of money on a lawyer that wasn't satisfactory. So here's a little bit of a checklist after I've identified the problems, and then sort of some ideas about how you can, take practical steps to ensure that you are getting the lawyer for the job. The first thing to understand is everybody has an agenda. Everybody's selling something. And a good principle in business, perhaps in life, is to try and understand what people's agendas are, where they're coming from. Now, with, let's say, a big law firm, where you haven't found a specific lawyer, but you've just, let's say, gone with a law firm because of its reputation, how do you know that you're going to get the right lawyer? Because, and also, even if you do get the right lawyer, how do you know that their agenda really is invoicing targets? Now, I know lawyers who work for these big firms will say, well, we're conscientious, and that's true, and we're quality lawyers, and that's also true. But, take, for example, personal injury, and you've got a lot of the bigger factory firms there. Those lawyers, however conscientious and however good they are working for the boss. They are subordinate to invoicing targets that they've got to hit each month. It's about profit. It's about turnover. And your case may be complex, but unfortunately, there's only a certain amount of time that they can dedicate to your case, proportionate to its scale, and it might not be doing justice to the case. And, we occasionally do find people come to us from personal injury law firms where they're just simply not getting a tailored service, and or they're being bounced from one law firm to another. But bear that issue in mind. Find a lawyer, not a law firm, and if you can, make sure that they're sufficiently sort of independent, conscientious, and that they're not sort of to a point handcuffed by being part of a big corporation. And now likewise, when it comes to that law firm or lawyer, I would try and make sure that, for example, that law firm will do no win, no fee. Now, talking outside the personal injury sector now, because no win, no fee is pretty much the way that sector works uniquely. But obviously no win, no fee can be used in other areas of law. And my view is that no win, no fee is only sort of to be used relatively rarely. And of course, law firms often avoid no win, no fee because, they're risky, they're dangerous, lawyers are working for free, they're not hitting their invoicing targets. But they should at least be prepared to entertain no win, no fee if the case is strong, the value is high, and it's a case where there's clearly a pot of gold at the end of the journey, like a property in a wills dispute, cohabitation property dispute, again where there's a property, where there's clearly a sum of money that's being argued about such that the lawyers can recover. Because it's all very well winning a case under a no win, no fee retainer, but as often as not, there could be difficulties actually recovering the money from your opponent. So, but nevertheless, no win, no fee is an important tactical tool, either because the client is out of funds, and you don't want them to be handicapped within the throes of battle once you issue proceedings, by a well-heeled opponent who uses the fact that they having to pay a large legal bill to keep the litigation, having to cash flow the litigation, uses that fact in order to drive them into an unfavourable settlement. This is why a law firm should be prepared to entertain no win, no fee to take that pressure off. The other thing about a no win, no fee is it does communicate to an opponent that you're up against determined lawyers, because a no win, no fee is in effect a partnership between the lawyer or the law firm and the client. We both either win or lose. And when an opponent knows that or senses that, they realise that they've got a fight on their hands. So it can be quite powerful for that reason. Now, coming to the lawyer themselves, obviously word of mouth is an excellent, if not the best way of finding a decent lawyer. However, be careful because, your uncle who's in the profession might say, oh, I know a good lawyer. But is he might be good, but does he specialise in your chosen area? Is he a civil litigation specialist? And here again, you've got to be careful about the way the industry works. Because a lot of law firms, and often, let's say, a smaller law firm who is trying to get in business and keep their mortgage paid, will take work that's outside their specialist area just in order to get the money to win the business. So make sure you have checked over that lawyer and that they are experienced in your chosen area. Quite frankly, an example for us would be cohabitation property disputes, where we've come up against opponents who are good family lawyers. But family law is not the same as when you're unmarried and you've bought a property together. A whole different legal landscape, legal system, different court applies. It's not the family courts, and a whole different set of rules. And a family lawyer may not be used to the county courts, to the civil court part of the county court. And that puts you at a disadvantage, and I've experienced that in my time. I don't do family law because I know it's a whole other ball game, and I want to make sure that I'm master of my niche, civil litigation, and further niches of wills and cohabitation property disputes. Yeah. So make sure you've got how reassuring to know you've got a seasoned specialist. When we're instructing counsel, I'm always looking to see whether they're seasoned in the area of law in which I want to instruct them. So you should be doing the same for a solicitor. Now, just one thing that perhaps needs to be said is that you do need to understand that life isn't easy for lawyers. What do I mean by that? People have this idea that we're all filthy rich. In probably 90% of the case in the case of 90% of solicitors, that's simply not true. We're working long hours. We're not billing nearly as much time as we actually spend on a case. And we've got pressures of complaints, of claims, negligence claims, insurance, and also a solicitor's running litigation for a long period of time. It's, like the Ukraine war. It's like being in battle forever. And the courts are so slow that it can be 2, 3. We've got one case in central London that we issued 4 years ago that's clogged up and taking forever to reach resolution because of the underfunded, under-resourced county court system. So I'm not necessarily asking you to be compassionate towards lawyers, but what I am asking you is to understand that, we're not fleecing you. We are not. We're just trying to earn a decent living, and it is quite a high pressure environment in which if you get it even a bit wrong, you get in trouble. You get complaints. And you get clients who, once they get into the courts, they realise it's very expensive and start not wanting to pay your invoices and telling you that they can't afford it. Which is actually why it's very important to have a war chest before you go into litigation. It's like any business enterprise, make sure it's properly invested, make sure you've invested in it properly. So here's a few things that you can consider when you're thinking about going around the houses and finding a lawyer. Well, I've mentioned one already, which is the decision flow charts, which you can use. Word of mouth is a lot better than testimonials, and certainly a lot better. Anybody can manufacture a testimonial for their website, can't they? And anybody can put up a nice photograph of themselves and create some spiel underneath a photograph that's going to superficially reassure you. So try word of mouth. I do think that I saw a video of a judge recently, and that kind of reassured me about the choice of judge for this case, and I made an application and slipped into an order that judge reserved the case for herself. And that was because she just made herself visible and physical. Because, better the devil you know. And I could just see she was a regular, reasonable person. She was speaking and answering questions for the general public on a video. So I don't know why lawyers don't do more videos. If a lawyer is prepared to, speak on camera, just find out. Use the video search of a lawyer. See if they've been in any conferences, given any presentations, or like me, running some sort of a YouTube channel. I like it when lawyers are prepared to step outside their ivory towers and talk to the great unwashed Joe public. It's just something reassuring about it, that they're prepared to be transparent about who they are and not hide in their ivory towers. Now, phone calls, obviously you might want to, initially speak to your client, have an introductory call. Be a bit careful about that, because the call might be quite short, and we're businesslike. We know how to say the right things to clients in order to reassure them. Just because someone's good at selling doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a good service once you've been sold. What I would do actually, if I was in this position, is I would pilot the lawyer, trial the lawyer. So what do I mean by that? Quite frankly, it's a false economy to try and get free legal advice out of a lawyer by speaking to them on the telephone. I think it's better to properly pay them. Now, for example, let's say I've got a building dispute. Well, I get my documents into Apple Pie Order. Another big takeaway from this video is, if you put your documents into Apple Pie Order, that is, chronological order. If you actually went to the lengths as we do, of printing out each email and giving it a separate page, so that a lawyer can skim through and tell the story, and we're professionals and experts at reading documents quickly and just focusing on what's important. If you create a PDF bundle of your case like that, which will keep your bill down because your paperwork's organised and you won't spend money, lawyers won't be billing you for secretarial work, collating documents, I would then send that to the lawyer with a covering email, much as we encourage people to do with Court Wingman. Send that to a solicitor and say, I'd like to book, and run a nice, polite and professional covering email. I'd like to book a review of this case, just a preliminary review. I'm not sure whether there are any merits, and I've got questions about how it might work and how you'd represent me and so on. But I'd just like you to eyeball my case. Yeah. How long would it take you to read through the attached and to give us, an hour on the telephone, a paid hour on the telephone? Now, maybe it would cost you 500 quid, which is probably quite reasonable if the bundle's not too big, and then you'll get a really good angle on the lawyer, won't you? And you might get some decent legal advice on the merits of your case and whether or not it's a good idea to go forward, to a contentious phase. And so and it keeps your powder dry as well, because often people are a bit worried about going to lawyers because, they might know the other person. They don't want to, they don't like the optics of it, communicating to another side that they're about to get contentious. But so you could do it quietly and get some decent legal advice, and that way you will get to know the lawyer better, and you kind of know when a lawyer's you get a feel for a lawyer if he knows his stuff, if you want to form a relationship with him, is the right lawyer for you, if his experience in the area. Again, it's a penny wise, pound foolish thing for me. Much better to do that and part with the money than, end up putting thousands of pounds down and being stuck with a lawyer for months and being in this horrible position where you kind of don't want to withdraw, and you've invested all this money and they're not actually giving you the service that you expected, and so on and so forth. Happens a lot. I mean, certainly, I don't know whether it's just something about people that they come to us having exhausted other law firms, but often we get not just one but two lawyers in whom they previously used, and often spent not just thousands but tens of thousands of pounds of money going nowhere. One of the big problems is finding a lawyer who is courageous, and a lawyer is prepared to eyeball you and tell you need to do this, rather than, well, you could do this or you could do this, or who tells you issuing could be very expensive, we advise you not to do it at all costs to try and reach a negotiated settlement without issue. Well, that's all very good advice, but you've already kind of looking at the dispute as being somewhat contentious if you're speaking to lawyers in the first place. Although, perhaps even in the majority of cases, that's the correct advice, it's a blanket advice that's given to lawyers, that's given by lawyers to clients, because they know what you don't know, which is the system and the rules and sort of the general drift in terms of the law, in terms of the justice system, is trying to avoid you going to court. I mean, I think it's probably to do with them just trying to cut down, government trying to cut down the cost of running a proper court system. So you've got to mediate. There's a recent case law which says that judges can now order parties to mediate. They couldn't before. Now the problem with that is 10 or 20 or even 30% of defendants or more will use that against you. They'll delay, obfuscate, avoid, evade for not just months, but potentially years, by which time you've rung up a £10,000 bill and gone absolutely nowhere. You'd have been better off simply issuing from the off and getting the train on the tracks and then negotiating and then mediating. Because a simple fact of life is, number one, news just out, number one strategy if you're a defendant is kick the can down the road and ignore it and be like the ostrich and stick your head in the sand, isn't it? Because the claimant has to do the running, has to spend the money, exhaust you out just by kicking the can down the road. If you've issued, then you've flipped the tables on your opponent. They've now got to find a lawyer because they've got to draft a defence for a start. And the clock is ticking and the costs are racking up. So again, you're looking for a lawyer who's got balls, prepared to eyeball his clients. Come back to that point about agenda, if you're working for a law firm that's into invoicing targets, you're happily doing your 9 to 5, writing a long letter trying to negotiate with your opponent, offering mediation, having mediation, engaging in all this correspondence, having consultations, getting a barrister involved, having a conference with a counsel, and you feel, I'm being looked after, I've got heavyweights and okay, it's expensive, but I feel there's some real traction and action taking place here. I've got my legal team. And then when it comes to issue, they're like, I'm not sure, it's risky, you know what I mean? And it could be really expensive. And the fact is that they've made a lot of money out of you, haven't they? Because a lawyer feels themselves exposed. I've just issued an important case, and we're forever. It's worth understanding how lawyers operate. Yeah, you're like very nervous about issuing proceedings because you're worried you might get it wrong. You're worried that maybe you should have accepted a derisory offer and just got on with your life and moved on to other clients. And you're now kind of like, you've gone into battle. Yeah, you're not an armchair general any longer. The law firm is on court record, and you have got to deliver. And I think, and put your money where your mouth is. If you've told the client previously you think it's a strong case and you should issue. So it's, you know, people prefer an easy life, and lawyers are no different. I'd rather just be constantly writing letters and telling the client, oh, let's write another letter, let's mediate, let's get counsel's advice, you know, and bill after the phone, put the phone down, right, 15 units, you know, brief to counsel, 8 units, emails, 15 emails, out goes the invoice. The boss, your supervisor, solicitor, or the partner is saying, I need you to hit your invoicing target. Bingo, you know, you've hit your invoicing target. So, yeah, I do think it's a good idea to, it comes back to the entrepreneurial endeavour, commercial endeavour point, doesn't it? That you, quite frankly, if you're not prepared to put money on the table at an early stage, you shouldn't be getting involved in litigation or even the threat of litigation. You've got to have a war chest. It's like any other venture or startup. You've got to invest in order to get a result. And don't be afraid either. You know, got another client. He's got a great case, but he's a retired professional. And he's smart, and he's a bit worried that, you know, of the unknown. But after you've issued, you can negotiate. You don't have to go all the way to trial. In fact, cases hardly ever do go all the way to trial. It's often a phantom fear rather than a real fear issuing proceedings. Now, you could ask the lawyer some questions if you do call them, or send them an email. Another idea, right? If you don't want to spend any money. You know, asking them about how much experience they've got in the area of cohabitation property disputes, and if they've got any cases they've been involved in, you'd love to know about them. Be polite and professional. Keep it short and sweet. Ask them email. I completely understand that this case might not be appropriate for a no-win, no-fee type arrangement, but what about a reduced no-win, no-fee arrangement where you get half your hourly rate, you only invoice us half the hourly rate, and you only take 15% rather than 25% of the final winnings. Yeah, you could sounding out a lawyer initially by means of an email or a phone call if they'll give you one is helpful, and it is nice if you can get through to your lawyer too, and you can phone them and they'll answer the call to you, or you email them, they'll respond quickly. This is another thing. I don't quite know how you kind of would check this out other than by word of mouth and reputation. But you do want a lawyer who is prepared to be proactive. And one of the things that I don't like about lawyers is that we're a bit like air traffic controllers. We've got 100 planes on the, what are they called? The dish. And, we park one and we don't worry, and we just leave it for a month. Well, that will probably have catastrophic consequences in the case of an air traffic controller. That can drive a client nuts. All the client wants is a little email saying, look, it's all under control. Nothing has happened. I've not heard from the other side. Have a great weekend. People just want to be updated. So it's very helpful. And if you've got one of those lawyers, then if you've got one of those lawyers who's actually proactive and is looking ahead, like a chess player looks 2 or 3 moves ahead, that is gold. Marry them and recommend them to all your friends. One other thing that I actually did this, I moved banks a few years ago. I was with Lloyds, then TSB, the old legacy bank system, and I moved to Starling. Before I moved to Starling, I read the book written by the owner, Anne Bowden, and I formed a view of her and of Starling Bank that encouraged me to make the move, and I've never looked back. It's been an excellent decision, and I've moved both my personal and my business accounts over to them. So, I bought the owner of the law firm and the vibe of the law firm, because, find out what you can about that individual, because at the end of the day, they're the one, everything trickles down, doesn't it? And if there's a decision being made about whether to run no fee, to take an example, and the owner says, no, we never do those, which I consider a little bit tunnel vision and not providing a full service to the clients, and not providing a full armoury of tactical tools that a law firm needs to win a case well, then, maybe that's not the law firm for you, even if you do like the lawyer. So I do think it's worthwhile, and the more mature amongst you, I think, will agree. I mean, when I was younger, I wouldn't have bothered to work out who ran the business and who I was going to do business with. But if it's an important decision, like a bank or a big bit of litigation, find out who the owner is and what their vibe is. I think it is worthwhile playing the field a bit, but not like 6 or a dozen lawyers. Send an email to 2 or 3, prepare that PDF documentation. Absolutely critical that you get your paperwork in apple pie order. The reason for that is, talking from experience, I give a lot more time and I go the distance with clients who are organised, polite and professional. You just love it. You want to work with people who are polite and professional. And if they are telling you off for something, they do it in a polite and professional way. I have just spent nearly 2 hours on a case with a client who's a good payer and who's polite and professional and organised. And because for free, I've done 2, just discounted it as a goodwill gesture. It was kind of like a satellite issue that he should be billed for, but which I took a view, and I did that because it's a good partnership with this client. And I've got another court wingman client who's come back to us that had a good success on their own, just using us judiciously a year or 2 ago, and have come back and with another issue, another case rather. And I just was like over the moon when I saw that they'd sent me a 25-page PDF with all the letters in chronological order, most recent at top. And then I could get on the phone to them. And I actually needed to do very little pre-reading, because most of it I could just skim. I could get the feeling of the story of the case just by reading quickly through the letters. I actually read through the letters in 10 minutes before the call, because they were trying to figure out Skype. And so if you do present yourself in a professional way towards the lawyer or towards the universe, you will be surprised. Have belief, trust that the universe will respond accordingly. Direct access. Now, obviously there's a little bit of competition. That's where you instruct a barrister and don't use a solicitor. Obviously there's a little bit of competition there, because direct access is sort of turning a barrister into a solicitor and taking away the solicitor's work. traditionally, you always go through a solicitor in order to reach a barrister, a bit like you always go for your GP, who then refers you to a consultant surgeon who's an expert. You don't go straight to the expert. And there's good reasons for that, obviously, because the expert doesn't want to spend all their time managing clients' paperwork and general strategic matters, conducting the case. They just want to, distill their expertise into the hour in which you're on the operating table, or in the case of a lawyer, on their feet in court, or giving an expert opinion on an area of law. And actually, barristers traditionally, for good reason, don't want to muddy their hands with clients, because they can get the problem is that cases need to be properly prepared, counsel need to be properly briefed, and they'd rather deal with the papers than they would have to, become a bit of a secretary and a hand holder and so on and so forth. And solicitors traditionally have that role. But anyway, there are times, I think, when direct access is a good idea. I've got a client, occasionally with court wingman, we think, well, you could instruct a lawyer, but they're going to double up the work. What you really need is a gold-plated bit of 24-carat advice on the complexities around, unjust enrichment versus a claim of proprietary estoppel as regards land deeds, or something really quite technical. We know a barrister that specialises in an area, and we'd suggest you just approach them directly, and we'll send an introductory email. Obviously, if you're speaking to a solicitor, and this is one of the values and the reasons that I set up Court Wingman, is that we can, really be a one-stop shop and not just take the work because we want to make money. Obviously, a law firm's going to want to hold on to the work, and they're always going to say, just instruct us and we'll instruct counsel. Well, there are times when, as I've illustrated, you might as well go direct to the barrister. So do bear in mind direct access. Not all barristers do it, and not all barristers who do it will want to do it with you in your case. But it's definitely worth bearing in mind. I think that's pretty much it. I've covered everything that I wanted to cover, at least. I will beat our own drum, because I think that one of the big problems that people have got is they haven't got someone to help them, hold their hands, to sort of guide them through the preliminary phase when they're just considering instructing lawyers. They're considering whether they're going to get contentious. They want advice on the merits. They don't know whether they've got a case, and so on and so forth. They just want this preliminary window in on the issues, and to be reassured one way or the other. And that's the mission of Court Wingman, is to primarily to be able to offer that as a one-stop shop service. And one of the reasons that, for example, we don't take phone calls from clients, we require you to email and book a surgery, is, I want to be able to keep, for as long as possible, £150 no VAT hourly rate. Because as often as not, in order to get legal advice out there now, you kind of have to, a lawyer won't get out of bed unless you immediately put £1,000 on account. So I'm trying to keep our service sort of lean and mean and competitive, and that's one of the reasons why we do most of our work from this back office here in Warsaw, in Poland, because it keeps overheads down and makes us competitive, and means that I can deliver the sort of service I wanted to deliver. So do by all means use Court Wingman, or use the videos. Use this video, they're free, or buy the book, even better. Or book a 1-hour legal surgery, as I say. leave a review if you found it useful, because reviews are like gold dust for online businesses, obviously, and it helps me to often spend like half a day on producing these videos, and that's probably why a lot of lawyers don't dive into the YouTube pond, is because it is quite time consuming, and quite frankly you could be billing clients and making more profits, and with YouTube it takes a long time to get into it and to get established as well. It took a long time before we were regularly getting inquiries with the channel. Anyway, use Court Wingman if you are feeling indecisive. If you're going to lay out clearly the story in a couple of paragraphs in a covering email, don't attach a zillion different PDFs and don't embed JPEGs into the email. Get your paperwork together first. If you can't get your paperwork together in a nice chronological bundle, then I'm really not sure that you should be getting involved in litigation in the first place, or you should just find the money, throw at a lawyer to be your secretary as well as your lawyer. Okay, that's all for now. I hope you found that of value. I am planning to refresh all of the videos over time on the channel, because I think they're now getting a little bit out of date. And I'm now a lot more experienced. We've got a lot more experience in dealing with the county courts through our client base, of course. I think we've got a window into the court system so far as civil litigation is concerned in the county court, second to none, frankly. So I will be going forward, I will be updating those videos, and I'll be doing a refresher on cohabitation, property disputes and contested wills. Okay folks, hope that's been of useful. Buy the book. It's a false economy not to. See you next time.